All right, guys, let's do some forensic astrology and let's shed some light on who was behind the Nord Stream explosion. Let's go. All right, so the Nord Stream explosion was clearly one of the pivotal events of the last couple of years in terms of the exacerbation of relations between Russia and Europe and the intensification of the Russia-Ukraine war. And what happened is basically that there is a couple of pipelines from which Germany mainly was getting most of its gas, its natural gas from Russia at very, very good cost, at a very good cost point, which used to be the foundation for the German industry. Germany obviously is an industrial state, has a massive industry, still to this day exports a lot of its industrial products globally and needs this basically as fuel for the economy. And this fuel for the economy, it was cut short, it was basically sabotaged when the pipelines, or the major pipeline, Nord Stream pipeline, it was blown up with two explosions. And right from the beginning, the idea was circulated in Western media that it was Russia who did this. Obviously, the Russians immediately denied. They were like, why would we blow up our own infrastructure and our own kind of power tool that we have here, our own leverage that we have here in being able to change prices and so on, and being able to have some market power over Europe. Why would we do that? It makes no sense. Who has an interest in this is whoever has an interest in seeing Russia and Europe, or Russia and Germany's relationships deteriorate. And who would that be? The German government, with the gutless cowards that are currently in power in Germany. They didn't even look into this. They didn't even properly investigate this. They didn't really look into who did this, because they don't have the interests of their own people, of their own economy at heart. What they care is their ideology and their transatlanticist woke partners and their plans that they have. It's not the well-being of the German people, very, very clearly. And in Germany, the only parties that actually asked for a real investigation were the parties that are marginalized, the AfD mainly, which is the kind of resistance party that exists right now in Germany and which is asking a lot of uncomfortable questions. But the investigations that did take place, they basically led nowhere. And for a long time, it was basically, that was the end of the story. It was just kind of imputed that Russia did this, until recently, very recently, last week, suddenly the Wall Street Journal had this article where it basically looks like they're trying to throw Zelensky under the bus, because they're coming out, the Wall Street Journal is coming out, and it's saying, based on, government sources and, their own internal sources, which they're keeping secret, they have now information that Zelensky planned this, and Zelensky knew about this, or some circle of Ukrainian businessmen and intelligence officers, they planned this, and then the Americans told them last moment not to do this, and Zelensky couldn't stop it anymore and just went ahead because he didn't have the power to call it back. That's kind of what the Wall Street Journal article says. But basically, if you read behind the lines, if you understand what's going on strategically and geopolitically, it really looks like they're preparing to throw Zelensky under the bus and to cut the aid and to say, when the time comes, whenever the time comes, they're already preparing, putting the first moves, the first kind of pieces into play to be able to say that, you did this, you kind of went on your own, you were a wild card, we can't support you anymore, whenever the time comes and whenever that decision is made. But now, when we look at the astrology chart of the Nord Stream explosion, we should be able to get some insights and some info on who actually was behind this. Because, is it really Zelensky? Is it really the Ukrainians who were behind this? Or is that a fabricated story as well for political reasons? Because that might very well be the case. Actually, it's very likely to be the case when you look at the story and at the timing when the Wall Street Journal came out with this. It doesn't seem right. So let's look at the chart. What you can see at the chart here, this is for the first Nord Stream explosion. And when we create a chart for an event like this, we basically have information on what is, on what forces are at play in this event. This is kind of forensic astrology, what I'm going to do here. This is not obviously on its own a proof of what's happening. It's not a replacement for geopolitical analysis or evidence gathering or other kind of forensic heuristics, but what it does is it tells you which forces were constellated in that moment and how they were constellated, because that's what astrology is there for. Astrology is a clock, is a cosmic clock that tells you the forces that are constellated in each moment. And then humans, we make decisions based on those forces and how they're constellated. A good part of the story is always cosmically written, and we co-write the rest of the story. So when we look at this chart here, we see, and this is what you can do with astrology, we see the story written in the chart, right? We see basically the story of what happened here written in the chart. So we have a sun in the second house, and the sun is in Libra, right? It's in the second house. So what does that mean? If you know the basics of astrology, you can take these elements and you can turn it into a sentence. That's how astrology works, right? You create a sentence. So second house, Libra, is resource partnership, right? Partnership is Libra. Second house is resources, right? So a partnership for resources, right? And here you have Neptune in 8. 8th house is the resources of others, right? Or also like getting resources from others is 8th house. And you got Neptune in Pisces, which is water, right? Water. Neptune is Poseidon, right? Water. So water resources, resource partnership with, right? Which comes through waters of others, And you have a Mars here, right? And the Mars is squaring these two. And the Mars is in 10, right? The Mars is in 10. So what is Mars? Mars is attack, aggression, right? Attack and aggression. Mars is squaring the two. So we have an attack on a resource partnership that comes through water, right? So this is just symbolic, this on the symbolic level, on the archetypal symbolic level, this is written here as a basic starting point, right? What else do we have? We have here the Uranus here on top, right? Uranus is pretty close to midheaven, kind of the highest standing planet at that time. So very fitting for upheaval, for change, for sudden events that happen, right? Uranus is always going to be involved, something like that, when you have like, bam, things changing suddenly. And this Uranus is in a square here. You can see it in a square to what? To Saturn. What's Saturn? Saturn is structures, right? Structures, any type of infrastructure, bridges, infrastructure, roads, and so on, and mundane. There are going to be, roads is going to be covered as well by Mercury, right? Insofar as it's travel, communicate, as it's kind of like smaller distances, closer, smaller distances for travel. It's going to be that. But generally, infrastructures, large infrastructures, is going to be Saturn, right? So we've got a disruption, right, of major infrastructures, which is Uranus square Saturn. And that's also written here, okay? So far, only thing we have done is we have seen that, the astrology, right, the archetypal clock, the symbolic clock, it tells you the story of what's happening there, right? But now here comes the thing. What can we tell about who was behind this? We can look at the asteroids. The asteroids and the dwarf planets and the asteroids, they are basically a new layer that has only been discovered over the last few years. We didn't know. We knew that there were some, but only recently we have really discovered the thousands and thousands of asteroids. That allows us basically astrologically to get a far, far more focused and concentrated and far more sophisticated astrological vocabulary, which I'm here deploying and I'm showing you how to do on this channel. Very, very few astrologers are doing this. Most astrologers are only using 1% of the available words, of the available elements that you can use in order to make an analysis. And by the way, as I'm saying this as well, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to this channel and look below if you are looking for consultations or to work with me, risk analysis, all of these things we can do now as well. I have some open spots that are available and that you can check out below on the links. They'll be posted there and everywhere. So the asteroids is where it's at. That's where we're going to get the level of detail, and the fixed stars, obviously. The fixed stars, they give you the big parameters. The asteroids, they give you the details. And that's where it's going to be at in terms of seeing which kind of narrative angles we can add to the big story and make the story much more concrete, much more specific. And we've got here, what do we got? We have here Germania, the asteroid Germania. It stands with Pluto. What's Pluto? Pluto is obviously the dark transformation power, right? So Germany is damaged, right? Germany gets massive damage from this whole story, right? Germany's with Pluto. And what else we got? We got Russia here. Russia is at the bottom, opposite the Uranus. Russia is affected by this, but it's not actually as much damaged as Germany. And Germany was the main party that was damaged. The Russian economy didn't even contract, or they didn't even lose so much. They're selling that same gas elsewhere now. They're selling it to India now. No problem. They're selling it elsewhere. Their economy has been growing. It's the Germans who've been suffering the most because their entire industrial base requires that gas, right? Their industry is not competitive anymore globally because they can't produce anymore at the prices that they could. Now, that's Germany. Now, who else do we got? We got Ukraine here, Ukraine and Kiev, but very interestingly, they're not affecting anything. Ukraine and Kiev kind of play no role in this story, right? They're not aspecting anything. They're not making any important aspects. They're not, they're kind of just, they're there too, but they're not playing a big role. So who does play a role? We got Washington here. Washington, is it Washington? Nah, not really. No, we got Polonia here. Poland, right? Poland, is it affected? It's kind of in between here, these two, but no, it's like, it's kind of in between the square. It's making a square to this big opposition. But we don't really look at squares for asteroids because asteroids are really small, right? We're not going to look at those small aspects, right? We're going to look at major aspects only. We're going to only look at conjunctions and oppositions maximum, right? So what do we got here? We've got Helsinki. Helsinki, he's here with the sun. Helsinki, Finland, right, is with the sun. Autonoma and Helsinki. Autonomy, Finland. We've got Langley here. Langley is, what's Langley? Langley is where the CIA is, right? Langley is where the CIA is. Langley is with Moon, though. Moon is mostly a passive role, right? Moon is mostly a passive role. It's also not directly involved in this major opposition and in the Mars story and in that Uranus Saturn that I talked to you about, right? Because that was the major signature of the attack and of the breakdown of the structure. Langley was not involved. Langley sits in a smart place, so CIA sits in a smart place with the conjunction on the moon, but not in a very active place. So maybe what they were saying in the Wall Street Journal about the Americans knowing about what's going to happen, but then not really, being the actor themselves, maybe that actually checks out. But who was the one who pulled the trigger? Who was the one who called the shots, if not Zelensky? Of all people, Zelensky, the guy who was the puppet par excellence. Like, he's being used and played by major interests. He's now given his entire country to BlackRock, and he's sent half of the younger generations of his country to die in order for BlackRock to get the land of his country. So this person, was he the one who called the shots for this to happen? Who was then, if not Zelensky? Who was? Let's see if the chart can tell us. And lo and behold, we've got here on the Jupiter here, which is in that major constellation, which is in the constellation opposing all of these planets down here, we got here the asteroid London. You see here, London on Jupiter opposing Sun and Mercury. So London is benefiting from this, right? Just like Germany was getting hit, London is significantly benefiting and is directly involved as well, because the Jupiter opposition is to the sun, right? Directly to the sun. So that means direct involvement, right? It's to the sun and to the Mercury, right? That means direct involvement. So London is directly involved, is majorly benefiting from this. And then we've got here on the Uranus with Rahu. Rahu is here, the North Node, right? This is where social destiny and social karma becomes concrete and manifests itself. That's Rahu, right? North Node. And Uranus, okay? Uranus was square Saturn. This was the breakdown of the structures that I mentioned. What do we got here? We have Albion. What's Albion? Albion is the old name of England, Albion, right? So used to be called perfidious Albion. That's what the French apparently called their eternal enemy, the kind of scheming English who are always behind the scenes, kind of making moves against everybody by planning some kind of sinister things to happen to you without you even noticing what happened. And Albion, this planet, or this asteroid rather, which stands for England, it's on the Uranus, right? So Uranus was what? On the MC. This was the major player in this story, was the Uranus here on the MC, right? Like the big clash, the big crash, the big unexpected crash. And you've got Albion here. So London on Jupiter, Albion on Uranus. And now, we're getting closer. We always like to see 3 hits, right? 3 hits is when we got a story, right? Before that, you can always say, okay, there was a little bit of involvement here, there, and so on. No, 3 hits is when it gets clear. And what else do we have here? On that same point, I'm going to zoom in here so you see this, right? And you're going to laugh. But astrology is sometimes funny like this, but it's also incredibly precise like this. What is this? James. It says James here. James. What is this? James. There's an asteroid called James. What is James? James stands for, James Bond. James Bond. That's what it stands for. Okay. So you literally have Albion and James Bond, right? Which stands for British Secret Service, right? On Uranus with North Node, right? On the MC. And that's in a square, as I showed you, to the structures. Like it's the active force that brings a bang into the infrastructures. And who benefits is London. Okay, I think we have our story. In some ways, we're lucky. We can be lucky that forensic astrology is not yet that widely accepted system of evidence that you could bring in front of people and you could say, hey, look here, we got the evidence, we saw what you did. Because otherwise, I'd be in trouble right now for dishing this truth to you. But we're not there yet. We're not there at that point of the consciousness shift and the paradigm shift. That's going to take several years for us to get there. We're at the very beginning of this paradigm shift when astrology is starting to be understood really for what it is. It's very beginning. So you are the pioneers right now, the first people, amongst the first people who are starting to see and learn and read what we can do with this, the level of insights we can generate. And at this point, people are going to shrug this off. They're going to say, there's some crazy stuff, some blah, blah, and so on. And it's fine. Let them shrug. We know the truth. And here, the truth is pretty clear. I mean, you could think of this already yourself. It was the British who went to Kiev. Zelensky was basically ready to make peace with the Russians. They went to Istanbul. They wanted to sign a peace treaty. And just before he signed the peace, Boris Johnson at that time, he flew to Ukraine. He went to Kiev. He went there on a special mission. And he went for that walk with, like with his duck walk there. He walked with Zelensky, with a t-shirt guy. And he said to him, you're going to be the big hero. We're going to make you the huge, you're going to be a movie star and you're going to have everything you need. House in Florida, house in Switzerland, whatever you want. You can skim off whatever we send to you. Don't worry about it. We got you. We're going to send everything. Do not make peace. This is well documented. We know this. It's the English. It was Boris Johnson who went there and prevented this peace from happening, right? Why? Because the English have the main interest, because of the position of London as the capital of the globalist capital of finance, because of the transatlantic strategy that they're driving, and so on and so forth. NATO is mainly a UK and US thing. It's not for the others, and that's for another topic and another time to discuss. NATO mainly serves UK and US interests, and everybody else is secondary in that partnership. Everybody else is a minor partner in that partnership. But now we saw this, and if you want to see more analyses like this, let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. There's so many things. Some of the things are a little bit controversial. We can't do necessarily. We have to be a little bit careful. But I'm going to try and go there slowly at the big things that happen in history to shed light on those. If you can think of a couple of things like the moon landing, or if you can think of other things that you'd like to shed some light on with this lens that we have, with this unique lens that we have, which wasn't available, right? for people. It wasn't available simply because they didn't know that these thousands of asteroids, they didn't exist. People didn't have this level of insight. They existed, but we had no means of knowing what they are and where they are, right? So if you want to see other analysis like this, let me know in the comments what you want to know, what you want to see next. And I'm going to do some of those things for sure if you let me know. And also make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet, and like it and push the like buttons, bang, bang, bang. And take care of yourself, be well, and be blessed.